everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Super Famicom game, and that happens to be Neugier. Honestly, I don't know how the fuck to pronounce this, so I'm going to call it the literal translation, and that happens to be Heartbeat of the Wind and Sea. Although there was another English name to this game, but I'll talk about that shortly. So the game was developed by Wolf Team, and it was published by Telenet, and it was released in 1993. But however, things get really interesting when you look into this game's backstory of development, because this game was originally going to come outside of Japan. And the name of it was going to be Journey Home, Quest of the Throne. As you can see here, they actually made a box art for it, and it was actually going to be published by Renovation. But as you can tell, the game was cancelled. And the reason for its cancellation actually had to do with Renovations being bought out by Sega. I'm sure you're probably aware, but Renovations did publish a lot of games on the Sega Genesis. But it is interesting to point out that this game did have a review article within Nintendo Power. So meaning that the game was very close from being released, but they couldn't release it due to the deal that the Renovations did with Sega. But this was not the only game that fell victim to this. There was also two other ones, such as Dream Probe, which was originally called Psycho Dreams, and then there was the Super Nintendo version of Arcus Odyssey that was also cancelled, but at least the Genesis version did come outside over here. So really, the only game to be released by Renovations on the Super Nintendo in North America happens to be Doomsday Warrior. Yeah, so it seems like Nintendo got the peckers on this one because that game is just fucking awful. Well anyways, that's all I have to say about the history of this game's release, is that I thought it was pretty interesting. I mean, could you imagine seeing this game advertised in Nintendo Power and thinking, man, this game looks really great, and then you realize that the game just never came out whatsoever? Well, the good thing about in this day and age is that now we can actually play the game, and it can actually be in English with a fan translation, which is always nice. And in case you don't know, this is a action RPG, though I'd say it's more like an action game, kinda similar to Zelda, but anyways, now let's start talking about the game's story. So you play as a character named Duke, who is an adventurer who happens to be the son of Count Wayne, which is from the kingdom of Neugier, you know, the funky title of this game. So Duke ends up wanting to travel back to his hometown due to the fact that he heard that there were rumors that his hometown was being under attack. But along the way, they end up getting attacked by pirates, and it seems like that the one ordering the pirates to attack the ship ends up being someone named Ord, who is also strangely connected to the attack on Neugier. So after the battle, the ship gets wrecked, and you have drying up on the shore, and you happen to get saved by some mysterious chick. And that sums up what you need to know about the story, since that's where, like, the major game begins. But there's two last things I do want to cover real quickly, and that is that the girl that saves you ends up having a power to sing a song that can paralyze things. And the other thing is that your father in this game is actually being possessed. So yeah, everyone in this game is just not having a good day whatsoever. So anyways, now let's get moving on to the gameplay. So it's a top-down view action game very similar to The Legend of Zelda or other games like Illusion of Gaia or Soul Blazer. So of course you get a sword that you run around and cut people with, but at the same time you also do get a grappling hook as your sub-weapon. So just like the hook shot within Link to the Past, this one allows you to hook onto walls and certain objects, and you can stun enemies with them, but unfortunately it doesn't completely stun them. It really just pushes them back a little bit, and it doesn't do any damage whatsoever, so the only way you can really kill enemies is by using your sword. So the combat in this game is just very simple stuff to understand, and there's no level ups within the game, although sometimes you can pick up hearts that will extend your life bar a little bit. And in this game you can actually jump, and there is a lot of platforming puzzles you gotta do in this game. Now one thing you're probably wondering is there any towns you get to go to? Is there any, like, exploration you get to do? Well, to put simply, nope, none at all. So you just go from dungeon to dungeon, but of course there are dialogue scenes in between them that does progress through the story and whatnot. So yeah, this is a very linear game, and I know some people probably would hate this game for that, but as for me personally, I don't mind games being linear. Now don't get me wrong, I do like games having some like open world environments you get to explore, but I don't think every single RPG related game has to be open world to be enjoyable. Because I do think it is kind of nice every once in a while to play a game that you don't have to worry about getting lost or having to worry about what the fuck you're trying to do again. So I really do think it's a good thing that we do have a mix of games that have the open world environments and some games that are more linear. So I do think that does make for a good, healthy balance. So yes, this is a more linear action RPG that doesn't really have a lot of different items you get to collect. But it does have some puzzles, and also the levels are pretty big and sometimes can be a little bit maze-like, especially in the later levels. And one last thing to mention before we move on, although this is something that should be pretty obvious, is that there are many different bosses throughout the game. So I think that sums up everything you need to know for the gameplay, so now let's get moving on to the controls. And I find them to be fairly decent. So the control layout is very easy stuff, and the response timing on them are also really good, but my only main issue here is that the walking in this game. Because I find it feels way too sensitive and way too fast. Especially when you have a game that's in top-down view and you have to do some platforming. God damn, the platforming in this game is really hard because of that. And with the way that the level design is, if you miss a jump or if you screw up, it can be really tedious to get back to where you once were. So because of this, the platforming in this game can be really frustrating, but as for running around and hitting things, yeah, the moving does work pretty well down there, so that's all well and good. And as for everything else, is like I said, pretty simple, and it does work well, so with that being said, the controls in this one are pretty good for the most part, it's just that one little thing that does make things pretty frustrating. So now let's start talking about the other things, like the graphics, and I find them to be fairly decent as well. So when it comes to the game's backgrounds, they're just okay, nothing mind-blowing, pretty typical for Super Nintendo standards. But the thing that stands out the most, at least to me, is the characters and the monster designs. I think they look really nice, bright and colorful, and I really do think they do look pretty good. Also, I really like some of the enemies in this game. There's a lot of pretty badass looking monsters in here. But as badass as these monsters are, it seems like that they didn't really have a good idea on naming them. For an example, you have these guys which are called Hitman. So are they called a Hitman because they were hired to kill you, or is it because they like to hit people? And finally I'll mention is that they have one called Rockman. So Mega Man is in this game? Holy shit. Well, to be serious, just the names of this game are just kinda lazy in general, but you know, that's just whatever stuff. But as for the graphics overall, I do think they are pretty decent looking, where I like the character designs and the monster designs, and I also do like some of the graphical effects, like with the tentacles at the beginning part. I think that actually looks pretty cool looking, and the backgrounds are just, you know, just okay looking at best, but overall, not too bad at all. Now as for the game's music, this one is actually really good. So I feel that the songs fit the area very well, and I also do find that some of them do get stuck in your head. And I do mean that in a good way, because I do find some of the songs in this one are pretty nice sounding. I especially really like the one that plays on the rooftop stage. And I don't consider any of the songs in the game to be bad. There might be like one song in the game that is like a little bit forgettable, but it's at least not bad at all. So now, if you want to go out and buy this game, if you want to get the original version of it, it actually costs very cheap. If you want to get a loose copy, it usually goes for about 10 bucks. And I've seen 2 complete in-box copies going for $25 and $30, so yeah, that's actually not too bad at all. I was thinking this game was going to be way higher up. But I did see one reproduction card of the game, and that one was going for $50, which I do think is a bit much, considering that you can just get an original copy for way less. Just the only thing is that it won't be in English, but thankfully this game, you don't actually need to fully understand the English language to fully enjoy this one. Just like I said earlier, it's a pretty linear game, and you don't need to worry about like where the fuck you're going kind of thing. But I'm willing to bet you can find a way better deal on a reproduction card on this game. But regardless, this one is still on the cheaper end, which is a surprise, at least as of right now anyways. So, as for my overall thoughts on this game, I find it to be pretty decent, so meaning that I don't think it's amazing, but I do think it is pretty enjoyable enough. So I do find that the controls in this one do take some time adjustment to, especially when it comes to the platforming. Now, since the grappling hook is your only sub-weapon of the game, I do wish it was a little bit more useful, or if it was the way it was, then I at least wish there was like a little bit more other sub-weapons you can get. It doesn't have to be like a crazy amount of them, but just a little bit more options would have been cool. And this is one complaint I have heard a couple of times about this game, and it is something I do agree with, is that this game is way too short. So I know that the game's length is usually not the most important part of a game, especially for older games, since there's a lot of arcade-style games that you can literally beat in under an hour if you're good enough. But when it comes to like an action-adventure game with some story plot twists into it like this, then I just wish it was a little bit longer, because having a short game like that is a little bit underwhelming, because it just really makes you wish there was more to the game. And there's only 6 stages within the game. They could have easily put in like 10 of these stages, even though some of them are pretty big. It's still something I wish they could have easily added more. But granted, I do find this game can be a pain in the ass and will probably take you longer to beat, especially if it's your first time playing through it. But one thing that does bring my piss to a boil about this game, even more so than a platforming, is some of the enemies in this game. Good God. Some of them are just really fucking pieces of shit. Like these giant birds that circle around you and dive down at you, and then of course there is the pirates that just shoot like an infinite amount of like knives at you. But probably the worst of all would have to be these ninjas. God damn it, these things are a bunch of cocksuckers. So it's really the pattern of these enemies that just really pisses me off, because you have to like jump and attack some of them, and sometimes it's just not as easy as it looks. And you really don't have any reason to fight some of these enemies, so it's better to just run away most of the time whenever you can. So if your health is really low and you make it to the boss without running into any replenishing items, then you're pretty much fucked, because if you die in this game, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of that stage. So even if you save like right before the boss, you don't start back off where you saved the game. So yeah, this game does have quite a bit of flaws that definitely could have been ironed out, but despite that though, I still found this game was pretty decent. Obviously, it's not the best action RPG you'll ever play on the Super Nintendo, but I think it did have some pretty good moments. And it's also not even close to being the best game that Wolf Team put out, because they put out some pretty good shit. Especially knowing that the developers of this game also moved on to the company Tri-Ace and put out even more good stuff on there. So yeah, decent at best, but definitely not amazing. But if you do want a simple but also easy to understand action RPG, then this one is not too bad. I mean, you could do way worse than this. So anyways, with that being said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.